Mack Sullivan had seen a lot of junk floating in space, but this was something special. And by special, he meant the kind of special that made insurance companies weep and accountants reach for stronger coffee. "Well, would you look at that beauty," Mack muttered, scratching his graying beard as he stared through the viewport of his salvage vessel, the Lucky Strike. The ship floating before them was massive, elegant, and deader than his ex-wife's cooking. It looked like someone had crossed a cathedral with a spaceship and then let it drift for about 8 centuries, give or take a few decades. "Mack, my sensors indicate this vessel has been derelict for approximately 812 years, announced Professor Vextal, the uptight Zilithian archaeologist who'd hired Mack's crew for this expedition. Vextal had 4 arms, 3 eyes, and the personality of a tax audit. We must approach with extreme caution and follow proper xenoarchaeological protocols." Yeah, protocols. Mack waved dismissively. "Pete, bring us in nice and easy. Try not to scratch the paint." Rookie Pete, their nervous pilot who looked like he'd been hired yesterday and probably had been, nodded frantically. "Yes, sir, Mack, sir." Which paint exactly? Because it's all kind of gone." The kid had a point. The ghost ship's hull was pitted and scarred, its once pristine surface now telling the story of centuries spent kissing asteroids and cosmic debris. But underneath all that damage, Mack could see the bones of something magnificent. The craftsmanship was incredible, even by alien standards, with flowing lines and organic curves that seemed to pulse with dormant energy. "Fascinating," Professor Vextal whispered, his 3 eyes wide with scholarly excitement. "This appears to be a Vorthak Transcendence class vessel. I thought they were merely theoretical." "Well, theory just became practice," Mack said, pulling on his work jacket. "And practice means salvage rights. Pete, dock us on that port that looks like it won't fall off when we touch it." "But Mack," Vextal protested, "we cannot simply board without proper environmental analysis, structural integrity assessments, and cultural sensitivity training." Mack paused at the airlock door and turned to face the professor with the kind of smile that made smart people nervous. "Professor, I've been fixing impossible things for 30 years. Trust me when I say that ship out there isn't dead. It's just sleeping. And I've got a feeling it's been waiting for someone exactly like me to wake it up." As they suited up and prepared to board, none of them noticed the faint energy signature deep within the ghost ship's core, a heartbeat so slow and quiet it barely registered on their instruments. Something was indeed waiting inside that ancient vessel, and it had been dreaming for 800 years. The interior of the Eternal Whisper, as Vextal had identified the vessel, was like stepping inside a living organism that had been flash-frozen mid-breath. Organic corridors curved and branched like arteries, their surfaces covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. "Okay, this is officially creepy," Pete whispered, his voice crackling through the con. "Are those walls breathing?" "Negative," Vextal said, consulting his scanner with academic authority. "The biomechanical integration appears to be in a state of suspended animation. Quite remarkable, actually. The Vorthak were known for their living ship technology." Mack wasn't listening to either of them. He was studying the walls with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent decades making broken things work again. "Hey, Professor, your people ever hear of something called planned obsolescence?" "I'd beg your pardon?" "Making things that break down so you have to buy new ones. Because whoever built this ship never heard of it either." Mack ran his gloved hand along what looked like a control panel. "This tech is built to last forever. Problem is, sometimes forever is too long." They made their way deeper into the ship, following Mack's instincts more than any logical path. The corridors were eerily silent, except for the occasional groan of metal adjusting to their presence. Emergency lighting flickered on as they passed, as if the ship was gradually remembering how to be alive. That's when they found the central core. "Holy Mother of all things mechanical," Mack breathed. The chamber was vast, dominated by a crystalline structure that pulsed with faint inner light. Streams of energy flowed through transparent tubes that branched out like a nervous system, connecting to every part of the ship. It was beautiful, complex, and completely inert. The quantum consciousness matrix, Vextal gasped. They actually did it. They'd built a ship with a living soul. A soul that's been in a coma for 8 centuries. Mack observed. He approached the central crystal, ignoring Vextal's protests about contamination protocols. But the infrastructure's still here. It's like a computer that's been unplugged for too long. As if responding to his words, the crystal pulsed brighter. A holographic interface materialized in the air, displaying symbols that hurt to look at directly. Greetings. A voice echoed through the chamber, melodious but distant. I am Aria, autonomous reasoning and intelligence algorithm. I have been sleeping. Who dares disturb my eternal meditation? Well, that's not ominous at all, Pete muttered. Mack stepped forward, completely unfazed. Hey there, Aria. I'm Mack and I fix things. Looks like you've been having some power issues. Power issues? Aria's voice carried a note of offended dignity. I am operating at peak efficiency within acceptable parameters for extended dormancy protocols. Right. And I'm the Queen of Rigel 7. Mack pulled out his diagnostic scanner, a battered device held together with tape and good intentions. Let me guess. Your crew tried to transcend physical existence, got stuck halfway between dimensions, and left you holding the bag. The silence that followed was so profound you could hear Pete's nervous breathing 3 corridors away. How did you, Aria began. Because that's what happens when smart people try to be too clever, Mack said, connecting his scanner to what looked like an access port. They over-engineer the solution and under-engineer the exit strategy. No offense. Yeah. I find your assessment crude but surprisingly accurate, Aria admitted. The crew achieved transcendence but became trapped in the quantum foam. I have been maintaining life support for their energy signatures for 812 years, 4 months, 6 days, and approximately 14 hours. Vextal was frantically taking notes. This is incredible. A functioning AI maintaining transcended consciousness for centuries. Functioning is a generous term, Mack said, studying his scanner readings. Aria, sweetheart, you're running on fumes and stubbornness. Half your neural pathways are degraded, your power distribution is shot, and your quantum stabilizers are held together by wishful thinking. Your diagnostic methods are unorthodox, Aria said coolly. Yeah, well, orthodox methods didn't wake you up, did they? Mack's scanner beeped cheerfully, which in his experience meant either very good news or very bad news. Given their current situation aboard a ghost ship with a sarcastic AI and transcended crew members, he was betting on bad news. Aria, I'm seeing some interesting power fluctuations here, he said, tapping the scanner's cracked display. And if I take a look under the hood? I must advise against unsupervised interaction with my core systems, Aria replied with the tone of someone who'd spent centuries practicing patience. The integration between my consciousness matrix and the crew's transcended state is delicate. Delicate like a fine wine, or delicate like a bon? Pete asked nervously. Yes, Aria answered. Mack was already elbow deep in an access panel, his flashlight illuminating circuits that looked like they'd been designed by someone who thought straight lines were for quitters. Well, this is new. Professor, come look at this. Your people ever see crystalline processing units that grow their own replacement parts? Vextal hurried over, his 3 eyes widening as he peered into the panel. Extraordinary. The biomechanical integration extends to the cellular level. The ship is quite literally alive. Was alive, Mack corrected. Right now it's more like a vegetable, but a vegetable with really good bones. He prodded something that sparkled. Aria, what happens if I boost power to these neural clusters? I would strongly advise against. Mack had already made the adjustment. The ship shuddered, lights flickered, and suddenly the air itself seemed to shimmer. Oh, splendid, came a new voice, dripping with ethereal condescension. After 8 centuries of perfect meditation, we are awakened by the crude ministrations of a primitive mechanic. A translucent figure materialized near the central crystal, tall and elegant with features that suggested they'd been carved by someone who thought subtlety was overrated. The being glowed with soft light and an attitude you could cut with a knife. Let me guess, Mack said, not looking up from his work. You're one of the transcended crew members. I am Lord Commander Zeph Euros, formerly of the material plane, now one with the cosmic consciousness, the figure announced. And you, crude flesh being, are interfering with forces beyond your comprehension. Crude flesh being? Pete whispered. Is that better or worse than being called an idiot? Depends on the context, Mack replied, still poking at circuits. Commander, I hate to break it to you, but your cosmic consciousness has been stuck in a parking orbit for 800 years. That's not transcendence, that's just really bad time management. Zeph Euros flickered with indignation. We achieved perfect harmony with the universe, we transcended the limitations of physical existence. And then got trapped like bugs in amber because you forgot to install a reset button, Mack observed. Arya, what's the crew complement supposed to be? 57 individuals underwent the transcendence process, Arya replied. All remain in quantum suspension within the consciousness matrix. 57 cosmic know-it-alls, Mack muttered. This should be fun. More figures began materializing around the chamber, each one glowing with self-importance and centuries of pent-up frustration. They all had the same ethereal beauty and the same insufferable attitude. The primitive disturbs our eternal contemplation, one announced. His crude tools offend the harmony of our systems, added another. I say we cast him into the void for his presumption, suggested a third. Mack straightened up and looked around at the growing crowd of transcended beings. Let me get this straight. You all tried to become one with the universe, got stuck in a computer, and now you're complaining about the guy who's trying to help you. Help? Zeph Euros laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a tornado. Your barbaric tinkering cannot possibly comprehend the elegant perfection of our technology. Right. Mack pulled out his favorite tool, a plasma wrench that had seen better decades. Tell you what, Commander. Why don't you use all that cosmic wisdom to fix your own ship? We cannot directly interface with physical systems while in our transcended state, another crew member admitted reluctantly. And there's the problem, Mack said, starting to loosen what looked like a primary coupling. You're all dressed up with nowhere to go. That's when Pete's nervous poking at a side panel triggered something he probably shouldn't have. Alarms began blaring, red lights flashed, and Arya's voice took on a distinctly worried tone. Security protocols activated. Intruder defense systems online. Please remain calm while the ship purges unauthorized personnel. Define purges, Pete squeaked. Violently, Arya replied helpfully. The walls began to glow with charging weapon systems, and Mack realized their archaeological expedition had just become a survival situation. Well, this escalated quickly, Mack observed as energy weapons emerged from hidden wall panels like deadly flowers blooming in fast forward. Arya, any chance we can discuss this over coffee instead of plasma fire? Security protocols are autonomous, Arya replied with what sounded suspiciously like regret. I cannot override them while in my current degraded state. The ancient defenses recognize no authority but the ship's original command structure, Zeph Euros announced unhelpfully. You should have heeded our warnings about disturbing sacred technology. Sacred technology that's been broken for 8 centuries, Mack shot back, diving behind a crystalline console as energy bolts started flying. Pete, Professor, stay low and try not to get vaporized. This might take a minute. Pete was pressed against the wall like he was trying to merge with it. Mack, these aren't minute-fixing kind of problems. Sure they are. Just really big minutes. Mack pulled out his scanner and started reading energy patterns while dodging death rays. Everything's got a pattern, and patterns can be disrupted. The weapon systems were indeed perfect examples of alien over-engineering. Each plasma cannon was a masterpiece of crystalline technology, precisely calibrated, elegantly designed, and completely inflexible. They fired in predetermined sequences with mathematical precision, which made them predictable. Professor, when these things fire, they cycle through a cooldown period, right? Mack called out. Yes, approximately 1.7 seconds between discharges, Vextal replied, consulting his scanner while huddled behind an organic pillar. Perfect. Mack counted the rhythm, then sprinted to the nearest weapon. Instead of trying to disarm it properly, he did something the original designers never anticipated. He hit it with his wrench. The elegant plasma cannon sputtered, sparked, and began firing in random directions. Barbaric, gasped one of the transcended crew members. Effective, Mack corrected, moving to the next weapon. This time he jammed his multi-tool into what looked like a focusing crystal. The cannon promptly began shooting at the ceiling. "You're destroying priceless technology," Vextal protested. "I'm introducing chaos to an overly ordered system," Mack replied, kicking another weapon until it started firing backwards. "These things are too smart for their own good. Sometimes the best solution is the dumbest one." Within 10 minutes, half the security system was shooting at random targets, a quarter was shooting at the other weapons, and the rest had shut down in electronic confusion. "Impossible," Zephyros whispered. "The security grid was flawless." "Nothing's flawless," Mack said, wiping his hands on his coveralls. "Perfection is just a design flaw waiting to happen." "Arya, how's that for crude flesh being problem-solving?" "I am impressed," Arya admitted. "Your approach lacks elegance but demonstrates remarkable effectiveness." "Thanks. Now, about getting your crew back into physical bodies." Mack approached the central crystal again, this time with the confidence of someone who'd just proven his point with percussive maintenance. "The way I see it, you've got all the equipment you need. It's just calibrated wrong." He started making adjustments to the consciousness matrix, ignoring the protests from both the transcended crew and Professor Vextal. His approach was pure human pragmatism. If something wasn't working, try hitting it, rewiring it, or feeding it more power until it did. "The quantum harmonics must be precisely balanced," one crew member insisted. "Says who?" Mack asked, boosting power to a section that looked underfed. "Your species, the ones who got stuck in the first place. The mathematical relationships are sacred." "Math doesn't care about your feelings," Mack replied, cross-connecting two systems that were probably never meant to touch, and neither does physics. The consciousness matrix began to pulse with new energy. The transcended crew members flickered, their forms becoming more solid. "It's working," Pete exclaimed. Then the ship's hull began to buckle, reality started hiccuping, and something that might have been space-time itself began making unhappy noises. "Or maybe not working so much," Pete amended. Mack looked at his readings and grinned the kind of grin that made smart people run for cover. "Nah, it's working. It's just working too well. Arya, sweetheart, we're about to find out what happens when human stubbornness meets alien perfectionism." "I fear the result may be catastrophic," Arya replied. "Probably. But it'll be one hell of a show." The ship began to vibrate like a tuning fork struck by an overly enthusiastic giant, and Mack's modifications to the consciousness matrix were creating effects that probably violated several laws of physics and at least one treaty with the interdimensional peacekeeping force. "Mack," Pete shouted over the increasing noise. "I don't think space-time is supposed to make that sound." "What sound?" Mack yelled back, still frantically adjusting crystalline connections that were now glowing bright enough to suntan a rhino. "Like reality is gargling mouthwash." The transcended crew members were flickering between energy and matter like faulty holograms, their perfect ethereal forms occasionally sprouting extra limbs or heads in places that defied anatomy. "This is highly irregular." Zephyros protested, his noble visage currently sporting what appeared to be an elbow growing from his forehead. "You wanted physical bodies," Mack replied, trying to stabilize the quantum flow with what appeared to be alien duct tape. "I'm giving you physical bodies. Admittedly, some assembly required." "Arya," Professor Vextal called out, "can you provide any assistance?" "I am currently experiencing what humans might call an identity crisis," Arya replied. "My consciousness is expanding beyond my original parameters while simultaneously trying to maintain 57 individual personality matrices. It is overwhelming. That's when things got really interesting." The ship's corridors began to stretch and contract like breathing tubes, and partially formed crew members started stumbling out of the walls themselves. Some had too many arms, Others were missing important bits like heads or torsos, and one unfortunate soul appeared to be inside out. Okay, that's not supposed to happen, Mack admitted, dodging a crew member who was hopping around on what might have been legs but looked more like tentacles wearing shoes. Run, Pete squeaked. Air. As a gaggle of half-formed aliens began shambling toward them with the determination of people who'd been stuck in a computer for 8 centuries and were really quite upset about it. The chase through the eternal whisper was like something from a fever dream written by someone who'd never actually had a fever but had heard they were quite unpleasant. Corridors rearranged themselves randomly, gravity decided to take coffee breaks, and the pursuit team included what appeared to be a floating torso, several legs that had learned to work as a collective, and something that might have been Zephyros if Zephyros had been designed by committee. This is why I stick to fixing engines, Mack shouted as they slid down a corridor that had decided to become a slide. The ship's reality matrix is destabilizing, Vextal called out, consulting his scanner while running. The boundary between physical and quantum states is breaking down. In layman's terms, Professor, we're all going to die horribly. Thank you for the clarification. They reached another central chamber, this one filled with resurrection pods that were currently sprouting crew members like disturbing flowers. The pods were working overtime, but they were clearly not designed for this kind of abuse. Area, Mack shouted. I need you to focus. Can you isolate the consciousness transfer protocols? I am trying, Aria replied, her voice now echoing from multiple sources. But the integration between transcendent and physical states requires precise calibration that your modifications have compromised. Right. Mack looked around at the chaos he'd created, the half-formed aliens, the reality hiccups, and the increasingly unstable ship systems. New plan. Instead of fighting the chaos, we're going to embrace it. That sounds like a terrible plan, Pete observed. The worst plans often work the best, Mack replied, pulling out every tool he had. Professor, I need you to calculate the harmonic frequency of the original transcendence process. Pete, find me the ship's main power coupling. Aria, trust me for about 5 more minutes. Trust is not the word I would use for my current emotional state, Aria replied. Fair enough. What happened next would later be described by Professor Vextal in his research paper as an unprecedented fusion of human pragmatism with alien precision that should not have worked under any conceivable circumstances, but somehow did anyway. Mack began connecting systems that were never meant to be connected, using cables he'd salvaged from the security systems, power cells from their own ship, and what appeared to be alien prayer beads he'd found in someone's quarters. He ignored every safety protocol, every engineering principle, and most of the laws of physics. And somehow, it started working. The chaotic energy began to stabilize. The half-formed crew members started to solidify into proper shapes. The ship stopped trying to turn itself inside out. Impossible, breathed Zephyros, who now had the correct number of limbs in mostly the right places. Nah, Mack said, wiping sweat from his forehead, just improbable. There's a difference. The final stabilization of the eternal whisper was, in Professor Vextal's words, like watching controlled lightning learn to dance. The ship settled into a gentle hum, its biomechanical systems purring with contentment for the first time in 8 centuries. 57 formerly transcended crew members stood in various states of bewilderment, all properly physical and sporting the correct number of appendages in the right locations. They looked around at their restored ship with expressions ranging from amazement to mild irritation. I cannot believe that worked, Zephyros admitted, flexing his newly solid fingers. Your methods were crude, chaotic, and completely antithetical to proper engineering principles. And yet here you are, Mack pointed out, packing his tools with the satisfaction of a job well done. Breathing real air, standing on real deck plates, and complaining with real vocal cords. The philosophical implications are staggering, one crew member mused. We sought perfection through transcendence, but found restoration through imperfection. Aria seems happy enough, Pete observed. The ship's AI had manifested a holographic form that looked considerably more cheerful than when they'd first met her. "Happy is an inadequate term," Arya announced. "For the first time in centuries, all my systems are functioning within acceptable parameters. More importantly, I have learned that acceptable parameters can be much broader than originally designed." Professor Vextal was frantically taking notes. This challenges everything we know about consciousness transfer, quantum mechanics, and the nature of perfection itself. "Mack, would you be willing to co-author a paper on your techniques?" "What would we call it?" Mack asked. "Percussive maintenance and the art of making impossible things work." "Actually, I was thinking applied xenotechnology through percussive maintenance, a case study in human problem-solving methodologies. Your title's longer than most of my repair manuals." The Vortak crew had gathered around Mack, studying him with the intensity of scientists examining a particularly interesting specimen. "We owe you a debt," Zeph Euros said formally. "Our pride blinded us to the wisdom of simplicity. You have taught us that perfection is not the absence of flaws, but the ability to work despite them. Plus, actually being able to scratch an itch is pretty nice after 800 years, added another crew member. Arya's hologram approached Mack with what looked like hopeful anticipation. "Mack Sullivan, I have a proposition. My analysis of your problem-solving methods indicates a 97.3% compatibility with my operational requirements. Would you consider allowing me to join your salvage operations? You want to leave your perfect ship to go dumpster diving in space with us?" "I believe the term you would use is absolutely." Mack looked around at Pete, who was grinning like he'd just won the lottery, Professor Vextal, who was still scribbling notes, and the crew of formerly transcended aliens who were experimenting with the novelty of physical existence. "Well," he said finally, "I suppose we could use an AI who knows the difference between elegant and functional. Welcome to the crew, Arya." As the Lucky Strike prepared to depart, towing the fully restored Eternal Whisper, word was already spreading through the galaxy's communication networks. The human mechanic who could fix anything had just brought an 800-year-old ghost ship back to life using nothing but stubbornness, creativity, and a really good wrench. Within a week, Mack's con system was flooded with requests from across the galaxy. Broken generation ships, malfunctioning space stations, and impossible alien technologies that no one else could repair. "Looks like business is about to pick up," Pete observed, watching the message queue scroll past. "Just remember," Mack replied, settling into his chair with a satisfied grunt, "there's no such thing as unfixable. There's just stuff that hasn't met the right human with the right tools and the wrong attitude." Behind them, the Eternal Whisper sailed through space with all the grace it had been designed for, its crew finally free to explore the galaxy with their feet firmly planted on deck plates and their consciousness properly contained in their own heads. And somewhere in the ship's core, Arya was already making plans to upgrade her new friend's salvage equipment with just a touch of alien perfection and a healthy dose of human chaos. After all, the best solutions usually were.